This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so that's fine. But I decided I had to justify it somehow, so I came up with at least two reasons why this presentation is important at an apologetics conference. I think one of them is the obvious one. Music has a huge impact on the culture, and as apologists, we need to be knowledgeable and sensitive to what's going on with people. And since music has such a big influence, we need to know how to deal correctly with it. And the second reason is a little more esoteric. I've read a lot of books on how Christians should deal with the issue of music and its message and these sorts of things, and unfortunately what I have come to believe is that most of these are really bad. And unfortunately, if we accept the methodology that a lot of people use to look into music and how we are to judge it and that sort of thing, two things are going to happen. Number one, a lot of people aren't going to take us very seriously because they already think we're weird. And most of what we do confirms that. And this is just one more area where they're already probably not trusting us a whole lot. And if we start pulling out some of the more ridiculous arguments that people use, we're just going to lose that much more credibility. And the second part of the second part is something else. And I don't remember what it is. Oh, I know. A lot of this really has to do with interpretation. It has to do with how we look at a text or a movie or anything else, and the methods that we use to discern the message of music is probably going to have a lot to do with what we think is legitimate in understanding other things. And so if we don't have a cogent, clear understanding of how messages are communicated and how they're not, then we're probably going to make mistakes in other areas as well, and of course we want to avoid that. My name is Doug Beaumont. I'm a professor at Southern Evangelical Bible College. I was saved in 1989, right as metal was starting to decline due to all the poser hair bands. And when I got saved, most people would probably assume that actually got me out of the heavy metal lifestyle. Actually, it kept me in it longer because since the church is always at least 5 years behind the world, I found a whole bunch more metal I could listen to. And it was about 2 years later that the first person approached me and said, "You shouldn't be listening to this stuff. It's worldly." And I said, "What?" And I've basically been in this kind of mental struggle ever since then to try to figure out why it is that I disagree with practically everybody, which isn't unusual in my case. But I think I've finally got some philosophical and biblical reasons for what I believe, and that's what I'm going to be presenting today. Now, we don't have enough time to go into as much as I would like to, especially as much depth, so I'm going to probably be making some assertions that aren't going to be backed up as well as others. I'm going to try to back up the more controversial ones. There are some books at the bottom of this sheet that I've gotten some of this information from, and so these are sources that I trust. And so if you want a little bit more information on some of these, read those books. Also, I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, just kind of machine gun style. Write down any questions you have, and I'll try to have enough time at the end to go more in depth with what you might have a question about. So let's have a look at the message behind the music. Many times when people are looking at a piece of music and they want to know, is it okay for me to listen to this or not? The question that is usually asked is it Christian? And what comes to your mind when you ask, is it Christian, is obviously going to determine your answer. Some of you probably see some things up here that you would not consider Christian right off the bat, and some of you maybe see some things that you go, wow, I'm really glad he put that up there. Whew, I can listen to it now. When I really started noticing this was this band here, Evanescence. I got a catalog in the mail from Family Christian stores, or whatever they're called, with a coupon for that CD. Now, it wasn't just a coupon for any CD. It was for that specific CD. And because I occasionally don't listen to Christian radio, always, I was really surprised because I went, hey, this is great. I get to buy this CD at a Christian store, put some money in a Christian store, and get this cool CD. So I went down there to get it, and they didn't have any. And I thought, great, Christians are buying good music now. That wasn't the case. I asked where it was, and they said, oh, we pulled it off the shelf because we found out they weren't a Christian band. I said, oh, okay. Well, how'd you find that out? And I expected them to say, well, that we looked at their lyrics and we actually considered what they had to say, and we came to the astounding conclusion they weren't a Christian band. No, they hadn't done that. There was an interview where they actually said, we're not a Christian band. And then all of a sudden everybody woke up and realized, oh, why are we carrying this in our Christian bookstore? And I thought, why didn't you figure that out in the first place? Well, where is the message in music? There's 4 places that people tend to have us look: the style of the music, the label, the artists, and the lyrics. Let's have a look at style. What do the following styles have in common? None of these look particularly exciting to us today. Yet every single one of these in their generation was considered the evil style that was going to ruin the world. In fact, this quote, which sounds an awful lot like something you might hear today, actually came from somebody writing about ragtime music. A wave of vulgar, filthy, and suggestive music has inundated the land. It is artistically and morally depressing and should be suppressed by the press and the pulpit. Well, things haven't changed much in 100 years, have they? I wonder if 100 years from now in the Apologetics Conference, when we're celebrating the 112th, somebody will have Metallica up here and they'll say, isn't it funny that people used to think Metallica is evil? Compared to what we have today, that's pretty tame. Ephesians 5:19 says, speak to yourselves in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Notice that it says to sing. It says to use music. It doesn't tell us what kind. Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs have to do with words. Colossians says virtually the same thing, and it says a little bit more, which I'll get to in a moment. But here's the problem. If you're trying to figure out if something is a psalm, hymn, or a spiritual song, where do you look for the meaning? Who can tell me what this means? Translate this into English for me if you can. Music doesn't have meaning. It can create moods, and we might be able to come up with some little code system. Okay, when I play a C sharp, it's going to mean table, okay? But music in and of itself is not a language. It cannot be translated. It has no meaning. And so we have to discover it somewhere else. What Colossians goes on to say is, whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord. Notice it's words and deeds. It's not talking about how you play your guitar. Some people say, well, what we need to do is focus on music that has melody. After all, isn't that what it says? Make a melody. Doesn't say anything about drums. Doesn't say anything about any of this other stuff. Well, the fact of the matter is all music has rhythm, either explicit or implicit, beats, and usually melody. Melody is just the part that you sing along with. Okay? Most people don't hum the rhythm guitar section. If you're a guitarist, you might, but making melody just means to sing a song. And if you're doing it by yourself, you're probably not going to, be singing the rhythm to yourself. Further, music does affect people. Okay, don't walk out of here thinking that because I'm saying there's no meaning in music, I'm not saying it doesn't affect people. It does affect people on the emotional level, more than the intellectual. But it doesn't bypass our cognitive controls, making people lose control. Music does not have any special ability to get into your brain and make you think things that you have no power over. It may make you more suggestive, but we'll get more to that in a minute. The syncopated 4/4 beat is not rooted in demonic worship. This beat existed way, way before anybody started doing that stuff. And it's in a lot of music that most people would not try to offend as being demonic. It has not been demonstrated conclusively that any particular beat or rhythm is necessarily harmful to the human body. How many of you have heard the plant analogy? Yeah, you put these plants in front of Led Zeppelin and they die faster. Well, you know what? If you don't plant them in dirt and water, they die too. But I don't go home and do that. This is one of the few places in Scripture I actually found anything that had to do with style. Psalm 150 says, praise God with the sounding of the trumpet, the harp, the lyre, the tambourine, strings, flute, and cymbals, clashing cymbals, resounding cymbals. This is not peaceful In fact, it says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. You can praise the Lord with a kazoo if you want to. But notice that the specific things that God actually says He likes looks an awful lot like this. Kind of looks like a rock band to me. We got horns, we got strings, we got percussion, we got all that good stuff. I told this to one person that was arguing with me about musical styles in the Bible, and he said, well, that's Old Testament. I see by your laughter I don't need to comment on that. Let's talk about other styles. What about secular style? Isn't it dangerous to copy secular styles? Well, all of these hymns were written to secular music. All they changed was the words. Here's some more. This last one was written by Henry VIII. Not a real Christian influence, that guy. But we sing those and we don't have a problem with it. Why? Well, because that's not the secular music of today. You see, everywhere else you go, they actually keep up with the musical times. But for some reason in the last couple of years, maybe just a couple generations, the church has somehow decided that we need to stay in the 1800s. Style is not useful for evaluating music. Music might have associations, but it does not have meaning. It's not a language. There is no such thing as a biblical style of music, and if there is, it sounds a lot more like the music that's usually attacked. And we have no trouble using secular styles in Christian songs so long as we're not aware of it. But it doesn't seem to hurt anything when we do. All right, let's cross that one off. How about label? What do the following bands have in common? Yeah, they're all Christian bands, but what? I'll just say yes. All of these guys have appeared on secular labels. All of these have done secular songs. They've been played on secular radio stations. And this causes a great bit of controversy. Is this where I talk about this? I can't remember. I'll bring it up later if I don't. Here's something I was reading recently. Clay Scott, who used to be called Circle of Dust, wrote, "The Christian music industry is a joke. It's not much different from the rest of the world. It's just that you're guaranteed to sell thousands of units if you're on a Christian label and a few thousand more if you mention God a lot in your lyrics." Labels have a lot of problems as well. First of all, how would we evaluate the label? I mean, how do you evaluate the label? You've got to know something more than the label. You've already got to have a way to discern what is good and bad, Christian, non-Christian, whatever, before you even look at the label. And if you're able to do that, you don't need the label. Some labels have bands that are Christian and bands that are not Christian. What do you do with that? How do you deal with secular material on Christian labels? I've got Christian CDs that don't have any really kind of spiritual message, using the standard terminology. And I've seen Christian material on secular labels. Back when I was a metalhead, does anybody in here remember Extreme? Yeah. Their Three Sides to Every Story has some of the best Christian music I've ever heard on it. But they're a secular band. Labels don't help a whole lot. Well, let's get a little closer to what's a little more probable. What about the artists? What do these bands have in common? Every one of them, in their time, was hugely controversial within the church because nobody could figure out if they're Christian or not. And it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Oh, is Creed Christian? I don't know. Is Creed Christian? What about these guys? What about, well, they said the F word once, so they can't be Christian. Oh, but they said Jesus once, so they must be Christian. You go on these message boards and people will take these really ambiguous songs and, oh no, this is to Jesus, see? And then somebody else will put the same song up and go, no, it's to Satan, see? The creed controversy is really the one that sharpened this for me because I was on a message board and I saw a lot of people arguing over whether creed were Christian or not. And so I just posted a real simple question. Who cares? I just want to see what would happen. But I really wanted to know, what is it that is going to change in your mind if you discover whether or not Creed is a Christian band? You've already got their music. What else is there to know? And that's what started making me realize, like, why are people so obsessed with this idea? Why are we so, I mean, If I knew these guys, I'd want to know if they were Christian or not, because then I'd know whether I wanted to witness to them. But I don't know them. I can pray for them whether I know or not. What is this obsession with knowing whether people are Christian or not? Well, I'm going to get to this later. Let's look at some other problems. What happens when a secular band is covered by a Christian band? All of these secular bands have had their songs played by Christian bands. Does the fact that the artists are Christian turn the music into Christian music? No, probably not. Look at DC Talk, hugely popular Christian band. They've covered the Beatles, Nirvana, Hendrix. Sixpence None the Richer would probably not exist if it wasn't for copying secular songs. I don't think I've heard any of their stuff on the radio that they wrote. Not that they're a bad band, but, give me a break. Amy Grant, well, she's secular now anyway, so I might as well just take this off the slide, right? Jars of Clay covered Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne, which is my ringtone, by the way. I've turned it off, but I just thought you might appreciate that. I'm not seeing too many scowls yet, so I think I'm still safe. There have been hymns written by non-Christians. I didn't find a whole bunch, but if there's even one, it's kind of interesting that we can sing hymns in church that weren't written by Christians. This is where I think part of the problem is. Galatians 1:8-9, Paul says, "Even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be condemned to hell. As we have said before, and I now say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to what you receive, let him be condemned to hell." Paul doesn't say that we need to know anything about whether this person's a Christian or not. It's the message. What are they saying? That is what determines whether or not they will be condemned. And I think that part of the problem is we're so bad at interpretation and we're so undiscerning when it comes to what is put before us in the culture that if we don't have someone tell us it's safe, we're afraid to do anything with it. And that's why we get so obsessed over whether these guys are Christian or not. I like Creed. I bought their CD. I read their lyrics. I can't really tell if they're Christian or not. And all of a sudden, I'm terrified. Because what if I'm listening to secular music? Well, maybe the problem is more with us. Are they believers? Okay, that might be a simple test for are they a Christian band or not. But are they all believers? Some people in U2 are Christian, supposedly, and some aren't. Some people in Extreme were Christian and some weren't. Do you just have to get a majority? Are they Orthodox believers? I'm going to show you in a few minutes a Christian band who is made up of heretics. Did they write the songs? How many of you open up the liner notes, read the lyrics, and then check the little copyright and make sure that it was actually written by somebody in the band? Most people probably don't. What if they weren't believers when they wrote it? What if they're believers now? Who's the freaky snake guy, Marilyn Manson's grandpa? Alice Cooper. Yeah, Alice Cooper became a Christian. Well, does that mean I can go buy all of his old stuff? Man, if Metallica would just get saved, that would rule. I love those guys. What if they were backslidden when they recorded? Richard, you got to help me out again. Vengeance Rising. Roger Martinez. Okay, here's a guy that is a full-on Satanist. Okay, you go to his website, there's pornography. It's not a porn site. He just puts it up there because he wants to offend Christians that visit his site, because the site is of a Christian band that he was in for years. They were huge in the underground Christian metal scene, Vengeance Rising, correct? Well, if you're any little bit Calvinist, you've got to kind of wonder, okay, since this guy's a Satanist now, if once saved, always saved is true, then what does that tell me about everything he did when he was in the Christian band, now that he's a Satanist? Well, does that mean I have to get rid of my stuff that was once Christian? These are confusing questions, and I think that the problem is that I think we're asking the wrong ones. One of the biggest problems with all of this is that how are we ever even going to be able to answer all of these questions for all of the music? I mean, even if these were legitimate, how would we ever get to the point where we knew enough that we could be absolutely sure that we were safe? I was in a Christian band in the early 90s, and every single one of those people fell away from the faith but me. So now I got to wonder if I can play my own demo tape. This is very confusing. I don't think looking to the artist is going to be terribly helpful in answering this question. Well, let's look at the lyrics. This is the only one left, so obviously it's the place I was going to, but even here, there are issues. Tell me from this passage whether or not you think this is a Christian song. Yeah, I'll read some of it. You're everything to me. You're more than a story, more than words on a page of history. Here's the interesting part. You're the air that I breathe. You're the water I thirst for. You're the ground beneath my feet. You're everything to me. Lord, you're everything to me. Yeah. Everybody from SES say pantheism. Yeah. The first time I heard this, I was trying to listen to the Christian radio station. And I went, oh, I must have it wrong. What is that? But I noticed from all the bumper stickers that I was on the right channel. And I went, this sounds really odd. So I came home and I said to my wife, I heard this crazy song in this Christian radio station. It's totally pantheism. These people are singing to the dirt and the air. They're saying God is in all the trees. I mean, what is this stuff? And she said, to me, that's actually the way I think of God. And I went, and then I started thinking about, well, okay, yeah, allegory, analogy, and I went through all my stuff, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess that's possible, but what's the point of this slide? The point of the slide is what? And unless I knew that it was a Christian band, how would I know whether these words were good or not? It's a tough call. How about this? Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God, you're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me, King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above, humbly you came to the earth, you created, all for love's sake became poor. Christian or non-Christian? Right, because it's Phillips, Craig, and Dean, right? Whoops. Phillips, Craig, and Dean are heretics. They're modalists. They deny the Trinity. Man, this is hard. How about this one? We are the champions, my friend. And we'll keep on fighting till the end. We are the champions. Is this a victory song for a hockey game? Is it the theme song for Joel Osterley's church? Or is it a gay pride rally? All of the above. How about this one? Father in heaven, God bless us. Father in heaven, God bless me. My soul, my heart, my glory. Praise to you, God. Long is the peaceful day, long is the night without gloom. Delight, joy, love, praise to you, God. I glorify you day after day. I glorify you night after night. Is this a Christian song? Yeah, you're scared to say, aren't you? Good. That's the point. This is by Enya, who you find in the Christian section of, oh no, I'm sorry, she's in the New Age section. Doesn't mean she's a New Ager, she's not, but that's where you go to find the music. It's interesting, the same people that did the Old Testament thing on Psalm 150 loved Enya when I played it for them and couldn't stand the overtly Christian band Out of the Gray, because Out of the Gray has drums and rock and roll guitars. And I said, that's really interesting that you're worried about my witness in listening to this music, because if someone heard me listening to Enya, they'd probably be a lot more concerned. But they didn't know that. How about this? Now let my people go, land of Goshen. Go, I will be with thee, bush of fire. Blood running red and strong down the Nile, plague, darkness, 3 days long, hail to fire. So let it be written, so let it be done. I am sent here by the chosen one. So let it be written, so let it be done, to kill the firstborn Pharaoh's son. This is right out of Sunday school, right? Wow. I didn't know they were Christians. This one, try not to get embarrassed, okay? A little racy, but we're all adults here. Your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. Woo! Yeah. That's from the Bible. And let me tell you, if you translate this one right from the Hebrew and don't clean it up, I could have had something a lot worse than this up here. Some of those ivory tusks and cantaloupes and deer aren't what they sound like when you read them in the English. So what about this charge? Someone says, in Michael W. Smith's album, Change Your World, I'll Lead You Home and Live the Life, the name of Jesus is not mentioned even once in over 6,000 words. Well, it would have been more dramatic if I'd had the other part pop up, but can we look at the lyrics and say, well, he doesn't or he does mention Jesus and therefore it's Christian? Well, none of these hymns do. I'd be interested to see what they would say about that. What constitutes a Christian song? What if the meaning is unknown? That was really the point of those slides, and I have a lot more that are also fun, but if I can't tell by looking at the lyrics whether or not it's Christian, then there's a tendency to kind of back up and default to the artist or the label or something else, right? I've got to figure this out. I've got to know whether it's okay for me to listen to this or not. We're going to go over meaning versus referent in a minute, but the fact of the matter is, if it is the case that the other ways do not work very well, are not very useful for determining whether music is good or bad, then it's not going to help to back up to those things once we've got some words. Okay, I just showed you, several examples, but they could be multiplied over and over and over and over again. It's just very difficult to tell just by looking at a song whether it's Christian or not. And I think that that is the point. I don't think this is the right question. Music doesn't get saved. A Christian is a follower of Christ, and songs don't do that. It's like asking, what does blues smell like? I think that what we need to be asking is it good? This requires discernment, not labels. I remember the first time I read a Christian author. I won't tell you his name, Neil Anderson, because I don't want to bring it up, Neil Anderson. But as I was reading the book and came to realize just how wacky this guy was, I thought, man, I bought this in a Christian bookstore. I thought the Christian bookstore was the safety zone, man, And I started realizing that, gosh, I can actually disagree with what Christians say. And this really freaked me out. I mean, I've been a Christian for several years. I never had this happen before. Well, the more I read and the more discerning I became, I started realizing that there's kind of an issue when you walk into a Christian bookstore and the Benny Hinn section is right next to the Hank Hanegraaff section. One of these people is wrong. But they're both in here. So necessarily, the fact that I'm in a Christian bookstore doesn't guarantee any kind of safety level. In fact, it may be worse. Discernment requires going beyond the labels and going beyond what people say about things. 1 Corinthians 14:15, he says, I will pray with my spirit, but I will also pray with my mind. I will sing with my spirit. And we're all real good at that. But I will also sing with my mind. This is the emotion, this is the intellect. Both need to be engaged if we are going to correctly discern music. If we are led along by our emotions, we're probably going to accept things in our intellect that are questionable. And I guess if we're totally led by our intellect, then we won't like a lot of cool songs. But sometimes there's a sacrifice with choices. Does 1 Thessalonians 5:21-22 say, test everything, hold on to the Christian, and avoid every kind of secular thing? No, it says test everything, hold on to the good, avoid every kind of evil. These are the categories the Bible talks about when dealing with moral issues. Some things don't require a lot of discernment. If you can't figure this one out, you need to just stop listening to music. Of course, the issue comes with the gray area. And I think that one of our biggest problems is we haven't been taught that there is one, that there is such a thing as neutral. And when we come to the neutral, when we come to the ambiguous lyrics that we're not sure about, well, it could go either way. When it comes to the bands we're not sure about, when it comes to the labels we're not sure about, that's when we start panicking. And what I want to try to give you is sort of a way to biblically, and I think philosophically, go through the process of discernment when you're trying to make these decisions. Now, I want to point something out because everybody really focused on one thing that I said at the movie seminar last time, and it really wasn't the point. From here on, we're not talking about Marilyn Manson, okay? I'm not saying that when you pull out a Marilyn Manson CD that you need to go through the process that I'm about to describe to decide whether he's good or bad. That's the obvious part. That's the easy one, okay? What we're talking about here is a third category that perhaps you've never even considered before because you've been locked into this Christian, non-Christian thing. I think that it's a false dilemma. I think that there is a way between the horns of this dilemma of Christian and non-Christian, even good and bad. I think that there is a third category that we need to recognize. There's a difference between something that is non-Christian and something that is anti-Christian. This lectern is non-Christian, but it's not dangerous to my Christianity. It's not anti-Christian, it's secular. Secular does not mean worldly or evil. It just means not overtly spiritual. Stop signs are secular. My checkbook is secular. It's just kind of there. It's neutral. It has no moral value to it. It's possibly ambiguous. And this is the category that always used to really bother me because I would think to myself, okay, let's just say you've got a song that's ambiguous and you know the band is a bunch of Satanists. Shouldn't that inform you somehow as to whether or not the song is good or bad? But see, the problem is with all the other things I brought up. I don't know if this person wrote the song. Perhaps they're performing something that somebody else wrote. I mean, imagine if every time a Christian wrote a song, a Satanist performed it and turned it into a satanic song. I mean, do we give Satan that kind of power? No. Just as a Christian doesn't have the power to take a non-Christian song and make it Christian just by playing it, Satan doesn't have the power to take a Christian song and make it non-Christian. Well, what about ambiguity? Well, I think that we actually have some good principles to deal with this. Did any of you ever see Highlander, the movie? Great movie. You ought to check it out. All the sequels were horrible. But there's this really touching scene where this guy's wife is dying, and this beautiful song comes on, and here's the lyrics. And I always just really thought it was fantastic because every time I thought about this song, it made me think of this scene in the movie, and it was very emotional, and I loved it when it would come on. And then I found out the horrid truth. Queen wrote this song. And if you know anything about Queen, you know that he was probably singing to a guy. Queen is a guy, by the way, the singer for Queen. So can't like that song anymore. Now every time I hear it, I think about other things that I don't want to think about. And I was so mad because they took away this cool tune that I liked so much. Now, there's nothing gay about the song. Absolutely nothing would ever clue you into the fact that this might have been written to a guy. Well, then, fortunately, an artist that I do like, Sarah Brightman, sang the song. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, well, maybe now it's okay. I'll just think of the Sarah Brightman version. Of course, I knew deep down that wouldn't really work. Plus, she's probably singing to a guy, too. Well, then I found out that actually the lead singer for Queen didn't write this song, the guitarist did, and he's not gay. Woohoo! I get my song back. But I started thinking, isn't this ridiculous? I mean, this process is there's just something about it that seems stupid. And I need to figure out what the problem is. Well, I knew from philosophy and from taking a million hermeneutics classes at SES that meaning, communication, only takes place in one place, and that is the words. That's it. The only message that can be communicated is through language. And what that means is when I have a song in front of me and I have the words, that's all I know about the song, about its meaning. Now, I'm going to introduce a distinction here that you've probably never heard before, so try to follow with me for a minute. Meaning. Meaning is what you get out of the dictionary. Meaning is what everybody in this room would understand from a song or a book or anything that I put up here that contains language. All of us would know what it means. We may not know what it refers to. There's a difference between meaning and referent. And this is very important. Because I told my wife today, I love you. Did anybody else say I love you to somebody today? What you saying you love my wife for? No, we can both use those words because there's no referent in them. If I came to my wife and said, I love you, Mike, that'd be a lot different than just saying I love you. And that's because although the meaning of I love you is the same, whether I say it to Mike or Elaine, actually it's not, but can we edit that out of the, yeah, thanks. Actually, it sort of is. Because the meaning of words is in the words. The referent may or may not be. And that's why all of us can say I love you to someone and not say it to each other. You follow that? Because the referent isn't in the meaning if I don't supply it. Well, if I can say I love you to my wife and not be saying it to whoever you said it to, then I can also sing that to my wife and not be singing it to whoever you sing it to. You can take a love song that somebody else wrote and sing it to someone that you love, as long as the referent isn't there. If the song is a guy singing to another guy and he doesn't say Fred, that song becomes an ambiguous song. It's a song that can be used for good or evil, and that is going to depend on the referent. Now, I'm going to stop there because if you haven't grasped that, you pretty much just need to take a class. It's hard, I know. Just keep in mind that all I'm saying is meaning without the referent is ambiguous, okay? And that's why we can all use words like dog. When you say dog, you're not talking about my dog, okay? Because there's no referent there. We all know what dog means. When I say dog, you know I'm not talking about my cell phone, okay? But you're probably, nobody in this room except for my wife is probably thinking of my dog because I haven't given you the referent yet. And that's why language works. We can speak in universals. We can talk about things that are ambiguous so that we can apply them to any referent. And yet it's this category that is denied by people that are looking for Christian versus non-Christian. When the Beatles sing, "Oh My Sweet Lord," everybody goes, "Oh yeah, but they're singing Hare Krishna in the background." Yeah, in the second half of the song. In the first half, they're singing Hallelujah. So they've given a referent. So we can listen to the first half. We just have to turn it off halfway through. Okay, hopefully you're kind of getting the point of meaning versus referent. Well, I was still uncomfortable because, you know, you come up with a really great philosophical idea, and then someone always wants the Bible. It's okay, I'm joking. Well, check this out. This is what sealed it for me. I'm now 99.9% sure that I'm correct. Does anybody recognize these verses? Who wrote them? Paul, God, okay. Paul, God, yeah. Whatever your understanding of inspiration is. Well, the answer is, it depends. Every one of these verses is a direct quote of a pagan philosopher. Look at the last one. We are indeed his offspring. In the original, when Aratus wrote this quote, he specifically wrote it to Zeus. It says it right there, unambiguous. The person he is speaking of is Zeus. This is a pagan philosopher saying that we are all a non-existent, idolatrous god and we're his children. And yet Paul, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, quoted this man in Scripture. Now, if the referent is part of the meaning, even when it's not there, then Paul is saying that we are Zeus's children. Well, we know he's not. Well, I think this proves my point. We are indeed his offspring. Just that part doesn't contain a referent. I don't know who his is, because that's a pronoun. Pronouns refer to other things in other parts of the passage. And in Acts, it's very obvious that what Paul is referring to is God the Father. Aratus was referring to Zeus, but they can both use the words because they mean the same thing. We're going to be in a lot of trouble if we don't get this. Because in the passage in Isaiah that talks about the virgin birth, Isaiah is not talking about Jesus. He is referring to the son of the king to whom he is prophesying to, and if that prophecy was fulfilled in Jesus, then he was a false prophet. Because the events that birth were going to signify have already taken place, and they took place hundreds of years before Jesus. Is this a problem? Yeah, it's a big problem if we don't understand the nature of language. When Isaiah said a virgin will give birth, he didn't say she'd still be a virgin afterwards, but Matthew does. When Isaiah makes this prophecy, he is referring to a child that would be born in his lifetime. But that referent is not in the verse as quoted by Matthew. Matthew quotes the verse and applies it to Christ, and he can because the words mean exactly the same thing. A virgin will give birth. Isaiah didn't say it would be a virgin birth. He said a virgin will give birth. Well, guess what? Virgins give birth all the time after they've had sex. In other words, a person who is a virgin right now is going to have sex and have a kid. That's all that is required for the Isaiah prophecy to come true. But when Matthew quotes that under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, this is not something we're allowed to do. He has no trouble quoting that verse because the meaning is the same. It's the same thing when Jesus' parents bring him out of Egypt. He says, look, this is to fulfill the prophecy, out of Egypt I will call my son. That was referring to Israel. But isn't Israel God's son? Yes. And isn't Jesus God's son in another sense? Yes. And so that word, out of Egypt I called my son, is ambiguous enough to refer to any of God's sons in any sense, so long as the referent is correct. Otherwise, we've got no way out of this. We've got contradictions that we can't deal with. So what does that mean for music? What it means is when we've got a song and we don't have a referent to know what the person is singing to or about, it doesn't matter. There is no evil power that can stick the referent of something into music if it's not in the words, because words are the only way that we communicate through language. It doesn't matter if the original person that wrote We Are the Champions was talking about gay people being the champions, or Christians overcoming and being the champions, or this hockey team overcoming and being the champions, because there's no referent in the song. I mean, think about it. I can still say we're the champions. Why can't I sing it? Why do we put music in this whole other category, whole other interpretation scheme, whole other philosophy of hermeneutics? We deny what we do in everyday language when we talk about music. We do things that we would never allow someone to do to the Bible when we judge these things. I just got done watching a 4-hour expose on the dangers of rock and roll, and this guy's getting up there saying, oh, Hotel California is about the Church of Satan, and you can da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going, no, it's not. The song is totally ambiguous. It's very difficult to tell what they're singing about. Well, the only way to know the referent then would be to ask the artist, and they say, yeah, it's about the crazy California lifestyle. Well, I can't overturn that. No, it's not. I've already figured it out. No, there is no referent in that music. And just as I can say, I love you to my wife, just as Paul can quote pagan philosophers talking about Zeus, just as the Bible can quote Old Testament passages that aren't referring to the things that they're referring to in the New Testament, none of that's a problem because meaning and referent are different. We couldn't talk otherwise. Because every time somebody said something, that referent would always be there. The minute I say, my dog is on a leash, nobody else can ever say that again unless they're talking about my dog. No, because that's not the way language works. The meaning is in the text, and if the referent isn't there, we are free to use the same language to refer to anything we want to. Now, I will admit that I would be uncomfortable singing "We Are the Champions" in church. That would seem a little odd to me, knowing its source and all these other things. And that was the last straw. I needed to figure out, how do I account for this feeling? How do I account for the fact that I'm uncomfortable around this music? Well, there's an answer. Significance. Meaning versus significance. The fact that a lot of people did drugs listening to Pink Floyd isn't significant to me because I never did. I listened to Pink Floyd on road trips to the coast. Those songs don't bother me. They're not about drugs, at least not these. They don't say anything about going out and doing drugs or whatever. So some people would probably be pretty uncomfortable if they came to my house and heard me playing Dark Side of the Moon. Because the significance there makes them think of all the bad things that they're associating that music with. And I think it's the same thing with "We Are the Champions" and that other cool song from Highlander. I'm uncomfortable because it reminds me of the fact that there are gay people in the world, and I don't like thinking about them and what they do. But that's not the song's fault. If I had never known that, I never would have had a problem, because the song is ambiguous. The song isn't about that. But the association is my fault. Paul says, "Some people are so accustomed to idols that when they eat such food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to an idol, and because their conscience is weak, it is defiled." This is not the way we ought to be. But of course, we know that that's not true. Idols are nothing. But if anyone with a weak conscience sees you who have this knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't he be emboldened to eat what he has sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. There are some times when people's associations, the significance of a morally neutral, religiously neutral thing, won't allow them to get past it. They can't get over their weak conscience. And in those cases, we need to take care of those people. I'm not going to blast some song that causes someone to stumble in their presence because I don't want them to think, well, I guess it's okay, and then go and sin. But I'm not wrong for playing the music. Causing someone to stumble has to do with causing them to do something they wouldn't normally do that's against their conscience. It's not about irritating them. Okay, I don't like smoking. I wish people wouldn't do it. It doesn't cause me to stumble if you smoke in front of me, though. It irritates me. But it doesn't make me want to do it. Okay, so you're not causing me to stumble. Eat anything sold in the market without raising questions of conscience. I found this very interesting. Eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. He's talking to the weak ones. He's saying, look, if you're so weak that you can't get past this association with food and idolatry, don't ask. But what are we told in every single book on rock and roll or music that I have ever read by a Christian is before you listen to that, you better find out who the artists are, what the lyrics are like, what their lifestyles are like, what they're trying to say, what labels they're on. No. If you look at a piece of music, it's not obviously evil, okay? Because, again, there's a lot of evil music out there, and we know it's evil. Marilyn Manson, okay? Everything that you need to know that it's evil is right there in front of you. I don't need to see "There's No Any Damn God I Know" to know that that is not something I should be listening to. Stephen Curtis Chapman, very obviously good, no problem. If I find something that is ambiguous, the idea that I need to go behind it and figure out everything that I need to know about the band before I can judge the song, I think is in direct contradiction to what Paul teaches. It's ambiguous. It has no referent. It has no obvious good or evil. So don't ask. Don't let it bother you. And keep in mind that this is dealing with the weaker people. And I'm one of them. I'll admit, there are some songs I can't shake the association that I have with them. But I know that it's wrong. It's weak. It's because I have a conscience that has gotten messed up by things I've done and things I've seen in association with certain music. But if the words themselves are not evil, and style, we've shown that that doesn't matter, well, then it's ambiguous. And you need to apply these principles. Hold on to the good. If a song is obviously good, hold on to it. Avoid every kind of evil. If a song is obviously evil, avoid it. Do everything for the glory of God. And don't cause anyone to stumble. Don't let your freedom... in another generation, We Are the Champions may still be around, and probably nobody is going to remember that it was originally written by a homosexual, probably about gay pride rallies. Nobody is going to have that association anymore, and because it's not in the song, there isn't anything evil about the song. This idea that music can somehow be imbibed with demonic spirits is an occult worldview. It's not a Christian worldview. We're actually listening to what the Satanists say about their music in order to not be Satanists or influenced by what Satanists say. Demons don't live in music. Demons have to live in rational beings or some kind of living thing. The Bible doesn't have demons in music and trees. That's not a Christian worldview. Okay, I don't know how much time I've got, but I'm going to stop there. I'll leave you with this thought by the granddaddy of Christian rock. 11:55. All right. Let me have it. Questions? Stonings. Yes, sir. Okay, how would what the label promotes affect a song? That would be my question. Good, excellent question. Thank you. Support is a different issue. What? Oh, let me repeat the question. Yeah, we still got like a couple minutes, so please don't shuffle too much. Should we support a label that supports satanic bands or something along those lines? That's a completely different question, right? Okay. Whether or not I support what somebody does is different than what they do. Okay, if I find out that my plumber is a Satanist and he's going to take that money to buy children on the black market to sacrifice, I'm probably not going to hire him. Not because his plumbing is bad, okay? It doesn't make the pipes that he already worked on evil, right? But there's a separate issue here. I don't want to give money to something that I know is evil. So that's different. And if you think, okay, you know what, I really like this group of bands right here, there's nothing obviously evil about the music, it's good music, I really want to buy it, and then you discover that they're taking all the money and they're pumping it into something evil, well, now we're in a different category of discernment. Now we're dealing with whether or not we should support that enterprise. But that is next level. That is beyond judging the song. So that's the way I would answer that. Yes, sir? Okay. Yeah, if you've got a band that is obviously anti-Christian, but they're not producing obviously evil music, then I would say that the music is ambiguous and the band is evil. Whether or not you listen to it is going to have to do with the ambiguity principle. What is your association? Because theoretically, let's say a Christian band recorded an entire CD of Metallica's. You know, they took all of Metallica's ambiguous songs and recorded a whole CD, and it was a Christian label, a Christian band getting Christian money. Well, fine, right? Because there's a distinction between what the band does and whether or not they're evil and whether or not the words of the music are evil. If the words are ambiguous or good, then there is nothing wrong with the music. Whether or not I'm supporting evil by buying it is a second level question, and that gets answered differently.
Well, actually, I was going to follow up exactly right there and ask about any guidelines as far as the whole support issue. For example, let's just say theoretically there's another artist that has a CD, 12 songs on it. 11 are good, and one of them refers to premarital sex with his girlfriend, for example. I'm just, I'm just trying to find out where guidelines as far as how do you know. Another example might be movies, for example. A PG movie may have 2 cuss words in it versus an R-rated movie that has 35 F words in it or whatever. So I don't know exactly how to ask it, except what are some guidelines as far as knowing with a clear conscience what can we support? What are some guidelines that might help us in our thinking there? If we don't want to support what is evil, I understand that, but without being absolutist about it, how can you guide your principles? What are some guiding principles that might hold us there?
Yeah, well, I think that in trying to discern what makes something good or evil, that's a whole ethics course. Is cussing evil? Is it evil in every context? There's all these different ways. I don't know that I can really answer that simply and quickly. But basically, if you're a Christian, you have any amount of discernment and you know your scriptures, then you've already got some kind of ethic formed in your mind, and you just need to apply that. But just make sure that what you're applying it to is what you're really applying it to. The fact that a band is evil does not somehow corrupt a good or ambiguous song, just as a good band doesn't sanctify a bad or ambiguous song. So when Jars of Clay does Crazy Train, that doesn't change the song at all. It is the exact same song. Whether or not it's evil, good, or ambiguous is going to be in the lyrics, and that's the only way I can judge it. Back. Okay. The question has to do with a Christian band touring with an overtly evil band, and whether or not that's okay, or what are the effects.
And causing, maybe Christians to stumble by going to see their band, but also having exposure to it.
Okay. Well, the first thing, once we've made a correct assessment, and let's say that we can say that Gwar is definitely evil, which is probably not terribly difficult to do. If a truly Christian band is touring, like when POD went out on Ozfest, I thought that was fantastic. Because what other chance are some of these people going to get to hear anything even remotely good? If a Christian goes to Ozfest to see POD and then sees all this other stuff, well, hopefully they're just discerning enough to leave. Here's the thing. All music has to be chosen. We all choose music based on something. Even when I was a metalhead, I never liked Sabbath and Ozzy and these really overtly evil bands. I never liked them. I wasn't even saved, and I never liked them. I never chose to listen to that music because it just didn't resonate with my character. And I would look at it this way, that to say, look, it's a good thing that a Christian band is going to a place where it would be very difficult to probably reach these people any other way. That's a good thing. If a Christian goes there and is so undiscerning that they just get sucked right into the evil stuff and can't even tell the difference, well, there's a much deeper problem. People don't listen to evil music if they don't already have some pretty major issues. Music is going to reinforce that, but there's enough music out there that you can find something you like without listening to the really overtly bad stuff. And I think that just goes right back to discernment. We're not teaching people how to think. We come out with these overly emotional, reactive things. I don't like that music, therefore it's of the devil. And all this crazy stuff that a 12-year-old can figure out is wrong. And we look dumb. And then when they go out and experiment, they have no discernment skills because we haven't taught them to recognize good and evil. And that's our fault. That's the problem.
When you said that style was not part of it, shouldn't be a part of that question, and that the music really doesn't have any language, I disagree with you and would point out one area of music and style of music that is very much a language all by itself, instrumental, and that's jazz.
Okay.
The language, what you do with the music, the presentation of the music creates a message. True, it has a part to do with it in the emotion, but
Give me an example of a message that jazz can communicate.
Very sensual.
That's a mood. That's a mood. That's not a language.
What I'm saying is, what the jazz licks that can be done on an instrument get across a message of, if you're going to say sensual, sexual, whatever.
Can you say, go wash the windows in jazz?
Not in a verbal tone, no.
Yeah. The distinction I'm making here is between mood and message, an actual message that someone can interpret. Music will create moods, no doubt. I mean, punk is angry music, jazz is sensual, blues is, like Steve Martin said, I really like this music, but it makes me so depressed. Okay? But there's a difference between a message that can be translated and interpreted in words and just being able to create a mood. Now, you might be, like I said, you might be able to create some kind of code. If I listened to jazz, I would have no idea what it was saying. There may be some kind of code that jazz people learn, and they go, okay, when you hear this, it means, sensual this, doing it that, whatever. In that case, now you've got a real message, and you can interpret that. My point is that the notes themselves can't be... Oh, good, the fight's back there.